Hi, I'm Coleman Glenn. I'm the assistant chaplain at Bryn Athyn College. We are in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, and that's why we're filming these messages from home. Today I'm thinking about a couple of things. First, I've been noticing some of the good things about how people come together in hard times like this, and that's been really wonderful to see. But today I'm actually thinking about sort of the flip side of that, something I've noticed that's a little bit troubling, that in times of stress, we also have a tendency towards blaming others. We want someone to blame. We have a tendency to divide into sort of us versus them. The people who are like us are doing well, but then it's those other people. Oh, they're the worst. They're causing all sorts of problems. They are partly to blame for something that's going on. So I wanted to talk today about how we manage to get past that feeling of us versus them so that we can actually believe we really are all in this together. And there's a parable that Jesus told that I think helps get at this, a parable that really helps push people past their starting point of us versus them. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. Now, to understand the story, you have to understand what a Samaritan was to the people hearing this. The Samaritans were the neighboring people to the north, and the Samaritans had come in. They'd replaced the tribes of Israel that had been taken away, and they had corrupted the Israelitish faith. They came and they brought their own ways of worshiping. They created their own version of the Bible. They left some things out. They were actively antagonistic to the people of Israel, to the Jewish people. And so when you hear about a Samaritan, it's not just that these are people who are foreigners or they're different from us. These are people who are actually wrong, and they're wrong in a harmful way. And so when people here in Jesus' parable hear Samaritan, that word just immediately is like, oh, it's one of those people. So what I challenge you to think about is do you have that reaction to any particular kind of people? And maybe you don't, and that would be wonderful. But a lot of us do. We have this tendency to think of certain groups as, oh, those people. I'm going to read a list of groups I thought of and see if any of these trigger anything for you. And if so, maybe the one that triggers you the most is what to think of when you think of Samaritans. So here's the list. People who defend everything the president does. People who criticize everything the president does. People who think they are the only reasonable ones because they can see both sides. People who ignore lockdown orders, or who criticize them, or protest against them. People who refuse to even consider any solutions other than strict lockdowns. People who won't acknowledge how bad the coronavirus is. People who only pay attention to the most negative predictions and ignore positive signs or suggestions. People with jobs who lecture people who don't know where their next paycheck is coming from. People who dismiss other people's struggles because they think they have it worse than anyone else. So think about, do any of those particular groups, or another group you can think of, incite that feeling like, those people. If so, that's who to think of when you think Samaritans. Now, there's another group in this parable. There's the priest and the Levite. And the priest and the Levite are people sort of who you feel like are part of your own group, and they're the authority figures. They're the people you're like, oh yes, they're speaking sense. These are finally people who say, yeah, they're saying the right things. That's the role of a priest or a Levite for the people hearing this parable. So we're going to start reading the parable. This is from Luke chapter 10. Behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested Jesus, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What's written in the law? What's your reading of it? So he answered and said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered rightly. Do this and you will live. But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Key to remember, starting question, who is my neighbor? Basically, who is us? Who's on our side? Who's on my team? Keep that question in mind. Keep in mind that this is the question Jesus has been asked. Who is our neighbor? Who is my neighbor? And Jesus answered and said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, take care of him. And whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you. So, which of these 3 do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And he said to him, he who showed mercy on him. All right. So who's the neighbor? Remember, this is the question. The question isn't how you should act if you see someone wounded. The question is, who is the neighbor? And the answer is, the neighbor is the one who showed compassion. Who is the neighbor who we're supposed to be serving? It's not defined by our group, people like us. It's defined by who is willing to show compassion. Who is acting out of a love for others. And here's the challenging truth, that there are people in whatever group you might have identified as, oh, those people, even if they are wrong, there are people in that group who are acting out of a genuine love for other people. And your job is to notice that and honor that and serve that and promote that rather than dismissing those people. And as if that wasn't hard enough, Jesus doesn't just leave it at, well, that's the neighbor you should love. Listen to what Jesus says. So he said to him, he answered correctly that it was the one who showed mercy. Then Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. You need to be like a Samaritan. You need to act more like one of those people you can't stand. That is the challenge. To look at what someone from another group, someone from one of those groups that is just, those people, and say, look at what they're doing. I could learn from that. How can I act more like that person? And that is hard. But that's what it takes. It's that level of not just, oh, I'll tolerate them. Yes, I guess they're good too. It's no, how can I have the humility to acknowledge they're doing something better than I am? Because it's only when we do that that we start to break down that barrier between us versus them. It's only when we do that that we break down that self-centeredness, that pride in ourselves, where we're not acknowledging that we're probably wrong about things too. It's only when we do that, when we say, how can I learn from them, that we can actually start to believe that we really are all in this together.